Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for coming over.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I don't know if you can tell, but there's a new addition, these two chairs. And then my wife, she said, "Hey, you can't have all this background. You have to make it into like a background." And I said, "Okay." So 400 and something dollars later with this background stuff. And then I don't
You
know if
got the mountains and the trees. I
yeah,
like it.
if you saw the first one I did with Pat,
I did.
there was no introduction needed. I don't think you need an introduction. I learned there was a LinkedIn video about a guy that was like a professional speaker, and he said, "Listen, if you're speaking in front of 1,000 people, 200 people, they know who you are. They came there to hear you. You don't
Right.
have to say, 'Hey,'
I'm so and so.
right? So we don't need an introduction. I'll
I'm
do
so
that
and
in the.
so.
I'll do yes. But what I really want to know, because I don't know you that well in terms of like how did you start getting into running period,
Sure.
but then to give you some mad props here to 8-time Leadville finisher, going
Correct.
on 9 this
I
year.
hope so.
Yeah.
Can't
Well,
take it
you're
for granted.
in
I can't
for
take it for.
9.
I'm in the race.
You're
Yeah.
in the race.
Yeah. I never
And
take it for
then
granted.
Leadman,
I've done a lead man in 17.
that's
Right.
what I was trying to find out
Right.
what year
Right.
that was.
Right.
So like 15 was Western States
Correct.
at
Right.
50 years old.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
that's the other part that I think that is
Yeah.
interesting to me is, you have people that perspective of, okay, I don't run. That's
Right.
one thing. But then perspective of, okay, this is like a young man's sport. But ultra running to me, and I remember hearing this from Byrne, was an older person's more experience, getting into it later in life. That's what I was. I was a late in life runner. But I want you to walk me through like what sports did you play if you did when
Right.
you were growing up, where you grew up around here or wherever. And then we'll talk about I think what I really want to get to is like I did with Kurt, how do you keep going back
Right.
every year
Right.
and finishing? Number one, this is amazing,
Right.
but the mentality of what it takes to train for that, it's like I know what it takes, and it's a
Right.
long process. So thank you for coming. Let's just dive right into, tell me about growing up and what
Right.
ultimately got you into running and ultra
Yeah.
running.
So I've lived in the Quad Cities my whole life.
Okay.
I'm one of the few people I like to say that I've lived in all five of the four Quad Cities. All right. I mean, I grew up in East Moline. My folks moved to Moline, Rock Island after law school, and then raised kids in Bettendorf. Live in Davenport now. So I've lived in all of them. But growing up, I was one of those kids that was pre AAU anything. There
Oh
was
yeah.
no. So I played baseball in the spring. I played basketball in the fall. I played like 1 year of junior football, and you know, didn't really like it. I like basketball a lot. I like baseball a lot. Back then, if you made the all-star team and you got to go to Milan for,
Oh,
a 3-day tournament, that was like the epitome of your summer. So I grew up playing those sports, never really a runner. Played tennis, golf in high school. Um, I always kind of ran on and off.
yeah.
I ran like the first Bix back in '82,
Okay.
long time ago. I ran like they used to have a scrub shirt classic at Trinity Hospital. I ran that a few times, 10 milers,
Okay.
and I thought I was going to die, by the way.
Yeah.
So I ran on and off, throughout my marriage. I got married in 1990. I had kids, didn't really run a lot, didn't have time to, rode the exercise bike, had a life cycle upstairs, and, that was kind of it. But I'd run occasionally.
Mhm.
But then I made a big career change. I'd been a lawyer for 13 years. And at the end of 2000, I decided I'd make the move with some clients into banking. And I knew nothing about banking. I told them that. I'm like, hey, I'm a lawyer. You hire me to run a bank. I've never worked in a bank.
Right.
I can't balance my checkbook for God's sake. But they sent me to banking school.
Oh,
And
wow.
and what banking school is, University of Wisconsin, it's going back to college, living in the dorms,
Oh,
going to
really?
the bars, but you have an expense account.
Wow.
And so back then, I would drink a little bit more. When I drank, I would smoke quite a bit. So I'm at the bars with these guys drinking and smoking. And one morning, one of the guys, hey, if we're going to do this, we really should try to do something good. Let's go for a run. And so we met at the student union on the lake at
Oh,
Wisconsin,
yeah.
and we'd run the lake every day. And I'm like, I really dig this. This is great. I'm coughing my ass off, and I can't run, but it's great. And fortuitously, at that same time, the marketing director at then the National Bank was approached to sponsor the Quad City Marathon. And so we started that sponsorship in '02. I was at banking school at the end of '01, August of '01. And Joe Marino was like, "Hey, you get a free entry." And I'm from Belgian descent. If someone says I get something for free, I'm not going to turn it down. And I always kind of had like, hey, bucket list,
Yeah.
be great to run a marathon. So, I trained for that 2002 September marathon, and I ended up running like, I don't know, 354, 355, something
Yep.
like that.
Good time.
Felt great, loved it, and I've now run 23 straight Quad City marathons in a row. So that got
Oh,
me
wow.
into it. And then, I started dabbling with some of the triathlon stuff in the
Hmm.
mid 2000, 04, 08 period, until I finally arrived at my preferred sport,
Long distance.
long distance
Yeah.
running. Yeah.
I love long distance. I think my life changed when I went from so stressed in terms of marathon
Right,
training.
right,
It's super stressful because you got to hit paces and
right,
you got to use
right,
speed and everything to just wake up and run whatever you want, make
right.
sure you can eat,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right,
Drink.
right, right.
We know that that's crucial for anything longer than a marathon is the nutrition and everything.
You bet.
So what was your, well, I mean, I think I remember, but what was your first ultra then?
I heard John Burns speak. I think sometime in 2008, he spoke at one of the, I think, Corn Belt events.
Okay, yeah.
And I had just come off of a 2008 Ironman down in Tempe, Arizona. Did a fundraiser, and honestly, swimming was a pain in
Oh
the
yeah.
ass. I mean, I like to swim, but going to the pool, getting changed,
Oh
all
yeah.
that, pain in the ass. I like road biking, but I always figured it's a matter of if, not when, I was going to
Gonna
get
get
hit by a semi truck. And so I always loved the running part.
yeah.
And I went and heard John speak in '08. And, when he started talking about things like pulmonary edema,
Yeah.
altitude sickness, wrapping his quads in duct tape. I mean, these were things that
You were
really
like that's what I want to do. I want to get
they
like
turned me on. And I was at a point in my life where I kind of needed like a new challenge and a
uh-huh.
new win. It was a 2009 was kind of, my dad died right at the beginning of '09. He had brain cancer, and the banking industry,
Oh yeah.
you may
I
have
lived
heard,
through
we
it.
had this thing called the Great Recession,
I lived
and that
through it.
started in '09. So, I had all these kind of negative things in my life going
Yeah.
on. And I'm like, I need something positive. I'm going to sign up for Leadville. So my first sign up was Leadville.
Okay.
And then I did, back then it was the McNaughton. It's the Potawatomi
Oh
now,
yeah. Yep.
the Pekin race. But I did that race as kind of my one warm up ultra before I dove straight into Leadville like a stupid blind guy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think I just looked and John's gonna come over, I think, tomorrow and
Okay,
do a podcast. And I look, and I was talking with Kurt and a bunch of other runners like Austin and John Militich, Pat, and everybody.
sure.
And I would say that I compared John Byrne to like Bill Walsh in the NFL. If you look at all the runners, like
Yeah,
you, me,
yeah, yeah,
Kurt,
yeah.
Austin, and it just goes out from there, and he's at the middle of it all. And so I didn't know
I'd
that.
like to say Coach Fry.
Well,
All the great coaches
okay.
originated with Coach Fry. But yes, I get the
You know what I
analogy.
mean? Like you can
Oh
see
yeah,
all there's like a
yeah.
tree of around Bill
Oh,
Walsh and Holmgren and
yeah,
all these guys that
he's the one that planted the seed
yes.
for all of us to go out to Leadville. No
Yeah.
question about it.
Yeah, he had done it what in 2005, I think. And I met him in 2012.
And
But
see, I played intramural basketball at
oh,
St. Mary's Church with him for like the prior, I don't know, 10, 12 years, something
okay.
like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you get signed up, you do Potawatomi, and what was your training like? Like, did you know it? Like, did you have any training? Because I remember talking to you, and I don't remember what year it was, but I was super impressed when I saw that you ran. It was either a sub 3:15 or a sub 3, I think it was marathon. It was like
I
a
ran a
3:0.
307.
Okay,
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
legit. And you weren't. How old were you?
49.
Right. And I remember asking you, what did you do? So my question is about training. So what
What?
did you do for training?
Yeah. And see, that would be all post 2009 Leadville because the 2009, I think there's a reason that half the people or more don't finish
Mm,
Leadville. And I think, I went into it very naive. I went into it, frankly, not respecting the race. I mean, hell, I'm like these people that I'm like, well, hell, 30 hours. Why wouldn't I run it in under 25?
yeah. Right.
I ran like an 11:20,
Front.
McNaughton 50.
Oh,
I mean,
50.
if I can do that, I mean, hell, I can run this thing in under 25. Should be a cakewalk. So, in '09, I went out without a crew, without pacers. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a training plan. Tom Waterman went out that year. He used a coach, but I didn't. I'm not one to glom onto somebody else's coaching. And so I just kind of went out and ran and thought, well, I'm running enough. This must be
Right.
enough. And I discovered between Winfield and Twin Lakes that it wasn't enough. And that was my first DNF, which frankly, if I had a pacer and had not been so stupid and naive,
Yeah.
I was passed by Larry Sandhouse. I had walked halfway down the front side of Hope Pass towards Twin Lakes when
Yeah.
Larry passed me, and I thought, well, if he wants to get back to his car quicker, and those guys ended up making the cutoff,
Wow.
and I'd forgotten I didn't have my light. I borrowed a guy's light. I was running with a guy that I found out had been throwing up for 20 minutes.
Nice.
And when he said, "Hey, we're not going to make it," that's all I needed at that point in time to say, "Well, we're not going to make it."
Yeah.
And I absolutely could have, and it was just lack of knowledge, preparation, all of it. And so, to your point, when I went back in 11, Ken Klober always said, if you don't finish, you're not going to regret it today or tomorrow or the next day. It's going to stick with you
Oh,
every day until you come back here and
yeah.
and that was me. It was like I had a sliver in my brain. I
Right.
had to go get it out. But when I went back, I hired Paul DeWitt. He had won the race twice in the early 2000s
Wow.
and coached 8 or 9 Leadville
Jeez.
participants. And I worked with Paul from 2010 until like 2020, 21. And that's really what, his training plan, the
Mm-hmm.
accountability he gave me,
Yeah.
is really what got me to suddenly I'm running faster and faster. It speeds, I got fast. My PR, every PR I have in my life was at age 49 or 50.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
amazing.
didn't think it was possible. Now, since then, I've,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
but
When you get
age does
the
happen.
miles add up, right?
Right,
So what did he specifically? I remember when we thought we weren't going to get in, Pat and I
right,
got a train,
right,
and it was not anything new for me, meaning like it was just a program. Hey,
right,
do this. It wasn't very there was accountability, but it wasn't very like structured in terms of like the guy he would spend 5 minutes on the phone with
right,
us. It's expensive, but we did it just so we could get in to the
right,
race.
right, right.
Um, but I remember that's when I met through Pat Militich, David Clark,
Sure.
and he started giving me advice, and you did too, about the treadmill
Right,
incline.
right.
So if you want to maybe give the audience some like specific stuff that you did that got you ready, I think that treadmill. So we would run with Bern, and he had a program in 16.
Yeah, he loved running
But
stairs.
I was like to Kurt, I mean, we got to do something else.
Right.
Once I started that with the stupid mask and the hiking for 3 hours
Right,
on that
right,
15-degree, I don't think there was any other better training than that.
right, right.
But
Well,
tell me what you did specifically, like especially if you had a coach. What was your mileage weekly?
right,
What were the workouts he was having you do? What was your longest run? Those kinds of
right,
things. I think people are interested in knowing because if you've never run a 50 or 100, it's like,
right.
what do I do?
Yeah, I'd recommend, Paul DeWitt to anybody. And, he was a big believer in, periodization. So we'd have 4-week training blocks that would get progressively harder from week one to week two to week three. And then week four would typically be a much easier resting week. Every week would have at least one long run. He would prioritize the runs 1 through 7
Okay.
workouts. Always try to get 1, 2, 3, 4. And he would say, don't do your high intensity workout the day after you do your long training run.
Yeah.
Some basic things like that. But I would have at least one day of speed work. I would do hill repeats
Mm.
where he would have me running 2 minutes as fast as I could up a hill, rest 30 seconds at the top, run down the hill as fast as I could, rest 1 minute at the bottom, and do 8 of those.
Oh wow.
And he would have me do repeats on the track where 2 minutes to run the track. If you finish in a minute, this is kind of like your backyard. Finish in 1 minute and 41 seconds,
You
you got
rest.
19 seconds to rest.
Right.
You finish in 1:55, you got 5 seconds to rest. You work up to where you're doing 24 of those.
Wow.
Yasso 800s on speed days, half mile, take, a minute or two to rest, do another half mile. So I would do one day of speed work. I would typically do a day or two of tempo, fartlek or tempo. I would do 1 day always of the treadmill climbing and then a long run. And, he would have me doing, I would typically do a 50 miler and 100K the year
Prior.
prior to running the
Yep.
Leadville as my long training runs. But the treadmill is one of those things I tried to impress upon you and Kurt and a few of the others because everybody's like, I want to run Leadville. But you're 70% of the time that you're at Leadville, you're hiking.
Yeah.
You may be running half the miles, but in terms of the time on your feet,
Yeah.
over half of it is you're
Going
hiking.
up.
And at that end of the race, I always love people who are passing me around Turquoise Lake, and I'm like, hey, it's a boat race, bud. This ain't a
Yeah.
sprint.
Yeah.
You're spending all of this energy. You're not going to be sprinting by me 90 miles from now, if
Yeah.
you're even in the race by that point.
Yep.
So, my go-to every week was typically 12 degrees, 4 miles per hour, 1 hour, uphill walking. Later on, I started going a little bit more like 3.5 miles per hour at 15 and mixing that in. But always that climbing, hiking element,
Hmm.
because I mean, as you know, there's nothing like, being at mile 42, 43, and you're on Hope Pass and
Yeah.
you're not running. I mean,
Yeah.
you're like walking for,
Unless you're winning the race,
yeah, unless
right?
you're David Roche or
Whoever.
Bill Mc, or not, or McDonald or whatever, yeah. For
Normal.
normal humans, mortal man
Yeah.
is hiking almost all of Hope Pass, the front and the back. And frankly, your power line, Hagerman Road. I mean, depending on which direction you're going, you're going to be hiking. And I got to the point where I mean, I could pretty much always hike, unless it was real steep, 13 to 15-minute miles. Now, granted, the Hope Pass, I'd still be doing my 30 to 40-minute miles.
Yeah.
But I think so many people don't practice how to hike, and you get into the race, and great, you can run 9, 10-minute miles. But if you're hiking at 22 minutes per mile,
Right. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
losing it. So
Yeah.
that was a big part of the training. But I worked that program, like I said, from 2010, and it would have probably been in the 13, 14 period when I was really starting to see some great. I thought I was going to break a three. My goal was to break a 3-hour marathon.
Hmm.
I was doing both marathon and I do 2 marathons a year, and I do 3 or 4 ultras a year. But I was really trying to break that 3 hour. Thought I could, but
Yep.
and then age and injury caught up with me.
I think for people like John Militich, who has attempted it a bunch of times, I've kind of figured out, like, if I look at all the runners that finish, one gauge I would say from what I've observed is if you can't run a sub 4, you're not finishing Leadville.
Probably not.
You know what I mean? Like, if you can't run 9-minute miles for 25 to 50 miles,
Yeah,
those 30-minute hikes,
yeah.
if you're running 12-minute miles, 13-minute miles, 14-minute, your average is
Yeah,
gone.
it's a funny race that way because those early cutoffs really require you to move.
Yeah.
And then, I think you talked about this with Kurt, and it's so true. You get to Twin Lakes on the way back, and if you can walk at an 18-minute per mile pace, you can finish the race.
Yeah. Yeah. You got power line,
Yeah,
and then you can kind of walk it in. Not,
yeah.
I mean, technically, you still gotta
You got
hike.
you
You
got
gotta
you
hike
got
hard. You gotta run,
right.
trot, whatever you want to call it. But all right, let's talk about you got a trainer. What about? I think you also got a nutritionist or something, right? So, or what did you change in terms of your fueling or your diet?
I really worked, again with Paul DeWitt, my
Oh,
coach, on
okay.
that. And for a while there, I was using the Perpetuum
Hmm.
stuff, and I would kind of mix it up, and this is still the mystery I haven't figured out because, I'm not one of these guys that can take gels for 24 hours
Yeah, no.
straight. I mean, I like, Perpetuum, Heed, Prolong was the Herbalife. I used that for a while, and I can drink that stuff for 6 to 10 hours. So, thankfully, I love mashed potatoes.
Oh
I
yeah.
love chicken noodle soup.
Hmm.
I love yogurt pudding. And that's where having the crew and having those types of things available for me at the aid station, really made a world of difference. And for me, it was just, and then my great secret, of course, is I take the carbonation out of real Pepsi
Hmm.
3 to 4 days before the race, and then
Yeah.
I just chug real Pepsi, and
Flat.
it flat
Yeah.
flat real sugar
Yeah.
Pepsi, and it's like ultra. It's like Red Bull
Fuel. Like
times
fuel. Yeah,
four.
it's
I
like
mean,
rocket fuel.
yeah, and for whatever reason, my gut handles it pretty well, and I've only had really one race where I mean I just I was losing it,
Yeah.
and that was the only other time I really thought about pulling the plug.
Yeah, I remember when before we ran it, John Byrne, when we were training from, like, I think when he was training for 2012, he would talk about the DNF most of the time, and I don't know what, it's a gut issue. I mean, mentally, it's probably that too,
Right,
right? But
right.
if you're not eating right, getting in the salt, getting in the real food versus the goos and the,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, I think that's,
Well, and you say getting in the salt. I mean,
yeah,
that's also a trial because I've seen at least a couple of runners who have really screwed themselves up getting way too much salt. And I had a friend in the Salton Sea race that was taking so much salt that he was about 36 hours in the hospital, nearly on a
geez,
kidney machine, because he took so much salt and then started, the projectile vomiting over and over and
wow,
over again. And so then he took more water, more salt, and
yeah,
it's like, hey, buddy, the problem isn't
yeah,
too much. It's you can do too much, too little. You gotta really figure those things out in advance.
yeah. We were worried with Austin when I went. We paced Austin Chesney, and he had those salt tabs. And at one point, I think it was when he barely made cutoffs the whole
Right,
time.
right.
And we were at was it Outward Bound, the big field,
Yeah,
and he went first. He didn't even come through the checkpoint. He stayed at like where the tent is before the checkpoint
right,
there,
right,
and
right.
he was like hanging out. And we're like, "What are you doing?
You
You've
gotta
got to
get
get
through.
across this line." And he had like
Yeah.
a little baggie full of those tablets, and I swear he probably ate 8 or 10. I'm like, "What are you
Oh,
doing?" I have it on video of
yeah.
him popping these salt tabs, but he sweats a lot, and I don't know. I mean, everybody's different. That's the thing about the nutrition too. I think
Yeah, I
is
think we need to get burned on those things because
yeah,
I've I've seen John a couple times around mile 50, and I didn't know human beings had that many pores.
yeah,
I was
he
like,
sweats a
holy
lot.
smokes, he
There's
sweats.
so we can talk about that now, but technology's come a long way,
Right.
right? Let's just, I mean, watches,
Yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
nutrition and all this stuff. And I just saw something online where you can do a food sensitivity test, right? You can do that,
Sweat
but a
test.
sweat test.
Yeah.
I just saw this and it was
Yeah.
like it will tell you how much you're sweating per hour or per whatever, how much you need. So I mean, I think it's good advice for him because he sweats more than anyone I've ever seen.
Well, and you could just do the real basic, weigh yourself
Yeah.
and then track
Yep.
how much fluid you take in and
Yeah.
weigh yourself at the end, and you've got a pretty good idea of what your sweat rate's going to be. But
Right.
but yeah, I heard a podcast on
Yeah.
the salt deal where they'll test you, and then
Yeah.
and then the other big science now is you got these crazy elites that are doing 100 plus grams of carbs per hour, and I do much more than 40 to 50 grams per hour, and I'm setting myself up for gut distress. But they're
Yeah.
moving they're moving so much more fast.
Yeah, I don't think I know we didn't focus on carbs. We focused on calories.
Right, right.
That first
That
year,
250, 300
300,
range.
three
Right,
fifty,
right,
and
right,
another thing with technology and food advancements and all that is that that can be now compact more than,
right,
carrying a backpack of
right,
food with you
right,
or on an
right.
aid station or whatever where you can bring it with you. That was
Yep,
another thing I want to ask you is like, getting used to walking and eating isn't something that I think it's something that you obviously need to practice. There's no question about
absolutely.
that. Um, all right, let's switch gears to the mental part of it because you did the Potawatomi and
Hmm.
that's 50 miles, right? And it's five
Right,
10-mile loops.
exactly.
I
Yeah,
mean, that can get mentally challenging for anybody.
right, right, right,
And a marathon is usually just some of them are point to point, some of them are, loops, but most of them are you're not going to do the same part of the course over
right,
and over again.
right, right,
So getting into that mentality of all right, Leadville's a 50 out, 50 back,
right.
and Potawatomi 5 10-mile loops. Um, Mines of Spain 20-mile loops.
Right.
Backyard Ultra. It's the
Four,
same
4 to 5 mile loop. Right.
every single. So
Yeah.
mentally, tell me what you did do and continue to do that allows you to train and go back, especially with Leadville. I mean, that one to me is just to keep going back, but finishing every time too.
Right. Yeah. My only DNF was that
The first
'09
one.
when I you know was just dumb. But yeah, I love the race. I love that part of the world.
Yeah.
Um, and for whatever reason, I've just gotten comfortable with it. And and not to sound cliche-ish, but when Ken Klober and Mary Lee talk about the family aspect of it, I
Hmm.
mean, I know it's owned by a big health club
No.
chain and all that, but they really have kept the focus on the runners, on the experience, on the family aspect, on the support. And I have found, frankly, that I'm one of these people, and I heard you talk about this with some other people. I like knowing where I'm at in a
Oh,
in a race.
see.
I don't like not knowing, like, okay, what am I up to next?
Really?
I like knowing that, oh crap, I've got the backside of Hope Pass.
Yeah.
And so when I'm at that Winfield aid station, I better make sure I
It's
have
yeah.
some soup and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some pretzels and a
Yep.
banana, and I better make sure I load up my fuel because I know I'm in for hell.
Right.
And I like knowing that, like 2 years ago, that front side of Hope Pass, I mean, it was so hot, it was so miserable, and having been there before, I knew I am supposed to feel like shit right
Right.
now.
Yeah.
It is okay that I feel like death warmed over. It's okay that I feel like I am failing miserably, that I'm hopeless here on
Yeah.
Hope Pass
Yeah.
because I know from past experience I felt like this before. And you're not, I think you're our friend that passed away, the
David.
David Clark.
Hmm.
He said it never always gets
Better.
better.
Yeah. I know.
Or maybe it never always gets worse.
It never
But
always gets
but
worse. Yeah.
but in these races, it fluctuates where literally you can be at that point below the hopeless aid station where I mean I'm walking 50 yards and sitting my ass down on a stump like, okay, I got to
Yeah.
get up and go. And you're like, I'm never going to get through it. And you know what? By the time I get back down the other side of this mountain, things are probably going to change. And they almost always do.
Yeah. I remember that burn taught us that early on, that it's never always as good as you think it is, and it won't be as bad as you think it is.
Right.
Just kind of got to
Right.
level those out, right?
Right.
Level those highs and the
Yeah.
lows. Just wait 5 minutes or wait
Yeah.
10 minutes and it will get better, or it could get worse, but
Yeah.
it eventually will iron
Yeah.
itself out. But I feel like a lot of people don't get to that point.
Right.
They'll quit, right? And I think that's my thing, is that you can't fool yourself into thinking you're not going to want to quit.
Right.
And the stay positive, stay positive, stay positive until you get out there and you're in that position. Just know, hey, you're going to want to quit, but you got to commit
Right.
yourself to keep
Right.
going. And that's the part about running it so many, multiple times and going back, that I can't like comprehend.
Right.
I got asked, would you go back and do it again? And I think I would, but with like a group of people again, because that was
Right.
like part of
Right.
it, right? Was we were all a group. But knowing now what it takes to train for it, I could do it. I could do the
Yeah.
training and all, but it's a big commitment. It's a huge commitment. So I guess the next question I have is got to do with the commitment to the running and knowing what it takes, but the balance of still having, that's the other part about age, and also having a job and a
Right.
family. So,
Right.
like my advice to anyone that wants to attempt any of this is, if you don't have your shit lined up,
Don't do it.
don't even attempt it,
Right. Well, and I
because
and I I think that's one of the other reasons that, it's getting to be a younger person's sport today.
yeah,
But, when I started and for the most of the time I've been running ultras, it's more guys in their 40s.
yeah,
And, when I got really serious into it, by '09, my youngest was, well, yeah, I guess he was still, well, he must have been, yeah, he was born in '94. So yeah, I mean, they were self-sufficient by the
hmm,
time I really got serious about it. And I have a very, Jody, I have a very understanding wife. And for most of my running career, I'd get home between 5:45 and 6, and put the dog on a leash and go out the door. And that was my 45 minutes to hour and a half of running, and come back, have the family dinner, and do that. So I always found the time to do it.
hmm,
From 20 on, obviously with COVID, and now that I've been retired for 2 years and 5 months. It's real easy now.
yeah.
Um, you know,
Actually, is it though?
it really
Because
is.
I feel like I've been retired from deer,
Right,
and I feel like I just read an article about the complacency that
right,
you could fall into. I didn't, but it could happen, right? Because you got all this time.
right,
What are you gonna do?
right,
And
right.
if you're not training for Leadville,
I
how are
like
you
to
gonna get out the
yeah,
door?
I like to play golf, and I
Yeah,
love to run. And
yeah,
I will say that as you get older, especially, the consistency becomes so important. I've had like I had a cervical fusion 6 7 years ago. And just in that, like, 3 months of not being able to run,
mhm,
to go back, you realize how quickly you can lose it. And so, I'm just right now hyper focused on, I never go more than about 3 days without running. And you were asking about mileage,
yeah,
through most of my, I usually 40 to 50 miles a week. And right now it's probably more like 40 to 65 miles a
yeah.
week. Um, and the difference is I've got enough chronic injuries. I can't do the fast stuff anymore. I get sciatic pain in my legs, my
Okay.
right leg especially. I've had an L3, L4 discectomy, and I find that if I run a lot on concrete and I run
Yeah.
fast, that that I get too much like it's like someone's putting that knife in the
Oh
bottom of
yeah.
my ass, you know. Um, and I can usually get through the marathon, but I usually take my high level Tylenol before the line, and I tell myself it's like the Matrix. This is just pretend pain.
Yeah. Right.
It's not real pain. Just keep going and run
Yeah.
through it. And but to your point earlier, and the mental side of it. I mean, like
Mm.
I always joke, running these ultras is like 50% physical and 90% mental.
Yeah. It's yogi.
You know,
It's funny. I was listening. I ran this morning just like a 4 miler recovery run. I lifted on Sunday, which is not my usual day, but I did like a long run Saturday, and I just have been lifting every 4 days. So
right,
whatever day it
right,
is, I do it. And I got past that mentality of it's going to screw up my running, because I'll do squats and I'll
right, right,
deadlifts and
right.
stuff like that, and we can talk about cross training. But I was listening to a podcast on my run, and it was Joe Rogan. He had on that guy Oz Perlman.
I don't
He's
know.
like a mentalist. Have
Okay,
you ever seen him? Anyway,
yeah, I know what I've seen the medalist stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I didn't know he was a runner. So he ran 26 miles before he went on to the podcast.
all right,
But he was talking about I forget now, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about the mental part. But I didn't know he was a runner, and he was talking about uh maybe it was about quitting. Oh, it was the DNF he had, like your 2009
right,
DNF. You could have just quit running altogether.
right,
And and this is a cliche again, but you learn more from your losses than you do your wins, right?
right,
And I want to get to people's point, like, okay, you attempted it, which is amazing. You got there and you failed, and then you said it's like this thing in your brain that either you make it go away or you feed off of it and
right.
go back. And I think people tend to just probably not keep going.
Yeah, and I've asked myself many times if I had finished the first 2009 race, would I have even gone back?
Yeah.
Would I have been John O'Brien
Yeah.
here? The
Right.
one and done,
Yeah.
and I think by not and then getting the coach and figuring it out, and the other thing is, I mean, we're all somewhat addicts
Mm-hmm.
if you're in this sport, and I sign up for these races because they force me to train and force me to stay accountable and consistent. But let's face it, when you cross the finish line at one of these ultras, I mean, you're higher than cloud
Yeah.
nine.
There's nothing better for that.
And, the feeling of accomplishment and the feeling that, I can do anything I set
Hmm.
my mind to, is so powerful.
Yeah.
And it really does, when I had that feeling in 2011 with my first, like, you know what? I want to do that again. Maybe I can do it better. And then you start, okay, can I get faster? Can I do better?
Hmm.
Now, of course, I'm back to just, can I finish?
Because you did break 25.
I
What
did.
year was that?
2013.
13. Okay, so let's talk about 2015, because I think that's when you did Western States.
Correct.
Now, Western States, for people that don't know, is it one of the oldest or
It
one of
is
the
it is the
first
it is the oldest
hundreds?
because it's
It's the
it's where
oldest.
Gordy Ainsley was supposed to ride the horse and the horse went lame.
Okay.
And the organizer said, "Well, Gordy, you spent half the time off the horse last year. Why not just run the damn thing?"
Okay.
And so he said, "Oh, all right, I'm gonna run." It was like the Tevis Cup,
Okay.
and so he went and he was the first 100-mile finisher. And then of course it's California, so four other crazy guys show up next year, and
Yeah.
and so it was the kind of the there were ultra races in the U.S. before that,
Mhm.
but it was really the first 100-mile run that got the craze started.
Yeah. And it's a crazy entry process. So
Correct.
walk me through how you go from you do Leadville and now Western States is probably the most iconic 100
Right,
out there.
right. Well,
Maybe.
when you talk about the crazy entry process,
Yeah.
you have to remember that in 2009, I signed up in March of 2009 to run Leadville.
Was it a lottery back then?
No, no,
Okay, so it was
it
just
didn't close till May.
holy
There
crap. So
weren't.
you didn't even know until that
Oh,
year,
I
like
I I,
of '09.
I decided in early '09 that I was going to run and
Wow.
signed up in like March of '09. And I think in 11 I signed up. You just signed up. There was no wondering. Now they did have the lottery for Western states,
Yeah.
which is, that exponential. You have to do the
Mm-hmm.
qualifying, you get 1,
One
then 2,
ticket.
then
Yeah.
4. And I think the first time I got in, I had like 8 tickets.
Well, okay.
And then actually I got in again in like 20 with 1 ticket, and that was the year I had my cervical fusion, and by the time it got close to the race, I'm like, "I'm just not ready to run this." So that was my only did not start.
Did not start. I got a couple of those. Um, so tell me about Western States. Was that the one where you had the foot
Yeah, 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 yeah.
fall off,
I can
basically?
I can send you
Yeah,
the
I want to.
I'll give you the photo for
Yes,
your
I remember
show
seeing
note.
it somewhere, and we were talking about it a couple weeks ago on one of our long runs, but it was Western States.
Correct.
Walk me through what happened, and this is just another side effect of running for 100 miles,
Well,
right?
and I was so primed to go under 24 hours at Western States. I mean,
Wow.
I was in probably the best shape of my life. And 2 things happen. First you go up the escarpment and then you're running on snow. And so, your feet are getting wet from the snow. But then once you're probably 20, 25 miles into that race, I mean, it starts getting really hot. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, as you would say, effing hot,
Yeah.
or whatever Boston acronym you would use to describe this, but super hot. And so what happened is you'd run into the aid stations and there'd be someone like with a full, garbage pail of water and like, hey, can I cool you off? So
Mm-hmm.
they'd like literally take a big scoop and dump it over your head. So, I've got my right foot out and I'm not paying any attention to the fact that I'm filling my right foot with water
Oh, yeah.
every single time I'm going into an aid station. And I didn't do a change of shoes, I didn't do a change of socks, and suddenly by like, mid-mile 30s or 40, I'm like, God, my foot's really not feeling good here. I mean, really feeling pretty bad
Yeah.
actually. And so we kind of looked at it, it's like, yeah, this is really not good at all. Well, by the time I got to like mile 45, I probably had like, the ball of my foot was completely gone. The heel was completely gone. It's called maceration. I've actually, my claim to fame is after that, at the finish, John von Hoff, who wrote the bit book, Fixing Your Feet.
Okay.
It's now edition 6 or 7, and my foot
Your foot's in
is
there.
prominently displayed as the worst case of macerated foot that he'd ever seen. But basically, I lost all the skin on the bottom of my
Yeah.
foot. They spent about 30 minutes probably at the 40, 50-mile aid station in there somewhere. And I mean, they did a huge, neosporin wrap, cut the skin off. I mean, did all
Ugh.
this stuff to it. But I still ran like under 20. I think I ran like a 27:10, something like that. I didn't get my 24 hours. And that was one I heard you talking about, like Kyle Dietz at your backyard. I could not run downhill because I would land on the ball
Oh,
of my
yeah.
foot. So I started running uphill and walking downhill.
Yeah.
And that was a great compliment. My friend John Appert, he's like, afterward, he's like, you're running with someone who wants to finish when they run uphill and walk
Yeah.
downhill. And I got through it, but I'll give you the photo. I mean, my foot was just trashed.
Yeah, I saw it. And I mean, I think that's another thing what happens to people if it's not a gut issue, it's a blister or a
Right,
foot issue
right.
or some kind of injury that's going to prevent you from finishing these
And again,
things.
dumb on my part.
What do you do for foot care now?
I wear Injinji toe socks, and I really that was the only race I've ever had a foot problem. I've had minor blistering. The other thing is, my wife and I spend the winters in St. Martin in the Caribbean, and I run barefoot on the
On the same.
beach for like 3 straight months,
Yeah,
and it really does
toughens them up.
toughen your feet up incredibly. And so between that and the micro wool
Hmm.
toe socks, and then just make sure I've got good fitting shoes. And the other thing I do now, I mean, if I start feeling tweaky, like I stop and
Yeah,
you
that
know
was, you told me that one. I remember, I don't even remember where we were, but you said, look, if you get a rock in your shoe, pebble,
right,
stop immediately
right,
because that pebble is going to turn into a hot spot pretty
right,
quick.
right,
And I just remember I had, I don't know why I bought these gaiters that weren't even really nice,
right,
really
right.
good gaiters, but for
Yeah,
Leadville in the first like 13 miles, I was like, they're off.
yeah,
They
yeah,
just suck. They weren't the right ones. Technology come a long way now.
yeah.
They build them in the shoe now and all that
Right,
stuff.
right,
But
right,
yeah, like getting a rock in there is stupid to keep running
right,
because you're not
right,
going to lose
right.
that much time in a race if you empty your shoe.
Correct, correct.
So all right, so we've talked about Western states,
I,
which is iconic. I go.
at some point, I want to talk about the 16 experience. By the way,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
let's talk about that now then,
All right.
because I was just going to jump to like the other part about that Oz Perlman thing, I think, was Joe Rogan and him were talking about how when you do hard stuff, whether it's karate or MMA or
Right.
run a marathon
Right.
or run an ultra marathon, the race he was talking about was one in Greece, and I can't remember the name. It was a Spartan something.
Spartanon.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
like 58.
Oh,
Oh no, it's
oh, it's like
130.
135
Yeah, that's
miles,
the
I
one.
think. It's
He
from
said
like
when he said
Sparta to
yes,
Athens or
that's the
something
one.
like that.
He's done that, and
Kyros something or other is the all-time guy on that.
that
Yeah.
was the race he was talking about where he didn't finish and then he went back and finished it. And he's done it multiple times. But he said when you get those wins, you feel like you can do anything else in your life. Like your job becomes this is easy.
Right. Right.
So let's all right, let's that we'll talk about in a second, but all right, let's talk about 16 because that was a really cool. I think you mentioned in the beginning about Leadville, the community,
Right.
and I felt it instantly when you go out there,
Right.
and they do a lot for that community. And the
Yeah.
race started because of the community,
Right. Well,
and
and that's how I get in now, by the way.
is the community
I do the Leadville, the
the
foundation.
foundation? Yeah,
I pay quite a bit extra,
yeah,
and I'm happy to do it. I'm at a
yeah,
point in my life where I can afford to do it.
yep,
And I tried to get in the lottery like 1920, and then they deferred COVID.
mm-hmm,
And so, I mean, it kind of came down to like, look, if I'm going to try to get this done before my running career
yeah,
dies, I'm going to have to do it. But I love doing it this way,
yeah.
and I love seeing what they do for the community.
Yeah, and I think that I wouldn't have probably, and you do it now on your own, right? Like when
Right,
we did it, it was the six of us
right,
trained together. We raised money together,
right.
so it was really cool to be part of that community here, and then go out there
Yeah.
into that community.
Well,
But
and if I have one regret, it's that when it came to the training part, I didn't train with you guys hardly at all. And really, I two reasons. First of all, I hate waking up at 4 a.m.
yeah,
You guys were crazy, like five
that's the only
o'clock.
time we could do it.
Yeah, and I could do it later in the day, and
Yep.
I hate working out at 5 in the morning. But the other bigger thing was I had my coach, and he
Hmm.
was giving me the prescribed workouts, and by that time I had a pattern that it worked in 11, 13,
Yeah.
14,
Why
15.
change it?
And it's like to try to then go and
Hmm.
introduce a new, or to just show up and like, hey, I know you guys are going to do your stuff, but I'm going to be over here doing
Yeah.
my own thing. So, I regret that I didn't get to hang with you guys more. But the community part was great, and frankly, seeing, I kind of went into it like, okay, who's going to finish, who's not going to finish here, and this is where I want to give you a compliment because we did the 24-hour run, and we started by like running out on the streets,
Dumb.
and I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing?
Yeah, we were dumb.
It's like he's running like 8-minute miles
Yeah,
here.
up hills.
It's like
Yeah,
he does know that
yeah,
we're going to be running for the next 23 hours, doesn't
yeah,
he? And so literally when we went out to Leadville, I'm like, yeah, I don't think O'Brien's got a chance. It's like if he does the same thing and goes out like a jackrabbit, he's going to blow up by
yeah,
like, and then to find out that like you went out like with Militich
yeah,
and barely made the cut. I was so proud of you and thought this is really cool that you figured it
oh yeah,
out that, like they say, go slow, start slower, go slow, slower. And you cannot, as long as you're making the cutoffs,
yeah.
go as slow as you can. And so I just remember from all those trainings, you would be the jackrabbit,
Because
right?
we didn't know. I mean, I
We
didn't
didn't
know
know,
that
right?
day when we were doing that 24-hour run. I mean, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks before the race.
Which was also dumb.
Stupid.
Oh, I think it was more like 5 weeks before the race.
Yeah.
It was the very end of July. It was hot. I know I went like 20 hours, had like 90
Yeah,
miles.
92 miles.
And then I was like, you know what? I'm getting a cold. I'm starting to cough here. I'm like, this isn't worth it now.
No.
I gotta bag it. I'm like, I've run 100 miles before.
Yeah.
I know I can do it.
Yeah.
But
No,
we raised a lot of money. We did some great work for the community.
we did. The other thing I think Kurt and I talked about was how stupid it was when we got out there
Right,
and we
right.
did Mount
Mount Sherman.
Sherman.
Right, right. Yeah, which I this is where I'm blessed because altitude doesn't bother me for whatever reason. I get lightheaded like everybody. My pulse is a little bit higher, but for whatever reason, I think my body, I've done it so many times, so many years. It's like, hey, you're at altitude,
Yeah.
something kicks in. And I've been fortunate not to have the altitude issues that, let's face it. I mean, that's probably the third reason people don't finish
Yeah.
Leadville is,
Well,
your low point's 9,200 feet,
yeah. It's crazy. And I mean, it wasn't like that. Affected me for that day though.
Right.
It was just whenever I
Oh,
get to 10,000, it hits me, and then I'm
yeah.
fine like the next
I
day.
remember you
But I
guys
was,
yeah, you guys at dinner were
oh yeah.
like you were like, yeah.
But it did scare me to death to think about it because it's just I don't unless you've experienced it, what it feels like to try to breathe in as hard as you can to get oxygen.
Right, right.
That you have to literally suck through your nose because your throat hurts. You
Yeah.
can't breathe in your mouth, and it was like, man, this is not easy.
No, it's not easy.
And
It's
that's
not
what
easy.
I just can't believe. Like you just keep going back
Yeah,
and knowing you're gonna suffer like you've never suffered before, and you keep going and
right.
doing it and finishing.
Well, and part of it is, there's still no guarantees here.
No, I know. Yeah.
I mean, and I'll be 61 when I toe the line this August, and I was looking at the stats the other day here, and this last year I think there were 7 or 8 in the 60-year-old division that finished, but
Okay.
that was a 23.3% finishing rate. So the normal 50
Oh, out of the total number of over 60.
the normal 50% don't
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah.
In the 60-year-old
It's
division,
higher. Yeah.
75% plus don't
That makes sense.
finish.
I mean, of course, it
And
makes
I
sense.
went back over like the last 6, 7 years of data, and it's pretty consistently only like 1 in 4 finish. And so, I hope to break the trend. My long-term goal, I'd love to finish this race in my 70s. I'd like to be
Hey,
able
somebody has, right?
I think someone has, but I think there's less than a handful
Yeah.
that have done it in their 60s, and it doesn't get easier. I mean, that's the
No.
problem. It doesn't get easier.
Right. So it's getting harder for
Yeah,
you and you're still going. So maybe you
yeah,
can talk about that. I don't know if people know that so you get a belt buckle, this big
right,
buckle,
right.
okay? And you get for sub 30 or 30 hours or less, which is the total cutoff, you get a regular kind of size buckle. It's pretty big though.
Nice buckle. Yeah,
But for 25 and under, you get a bigger buckle,
yeah, yeah.
a
You
big
do.
buckle.
You get it's much bigger.
But if you finish it 10 times, which you're on your way to doing, hopefully,
You get a
you
dinner
get a
platter.
giant
It's
buckle.
like a trash can lid.
Yeah, it's huge. I've
It's
seen it.
very big.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then now what we didn't talk about was Leadman.
right.
Okay. And Leadman for you was what year?
2017.
2017.
Right.
So explain what is the lead challenge or like what is it called? It's not the
Well,
lead man, right?
I think they found lead man to be sexist,
Right. So
so
it's
now
lead
it's
challenge.
lead challenge now. But yeah, it's you basically you do the marathon in June. You can choose between the 50-mile bike or the run or do both. I did the run that year. Then you go back and you do the 100-mile mountain bike ride,
Hmm.
and then they do the 10K, and then the week after the 100-mile bike, you do the 100-mile run. And I really wasn't much of a biker before, so that was what I was probably most worried about. And it turns out I had really no problem on the bike other than feeling it the next week on the run.
Oh yeah.
Because I really thought I've had a few years where I've set my sights on it again, trying to get a second big buckle. And in 17, it became apparent very early. In fact, that was the only other year that I really thought about quitting,
Oh well.
and that's where having, you met my son Walt. He's helped me on
Yep.
just about all the runs, but two, I want to say. And coming in to Outward Bound, I'd been throwing up. I'm feeling awful, and I told him, I was like, I don't need to prove this anything. I think I'm going to pull the plug. And he just looked at me and goes, Dad, you can do whatever you want. I've never known you to be a quitter,
Oh
but you can do whatever you want. But he says,
yeah.
he goes, I can either run with you from here to May Queen, or I'll meet you at May Queen and I'll run in with you. And I think I had a pacer, but they were dropping out at that point. I said, I'll see you at May Queen, kid.
Okay. So you were coming back
I was coming
on the way
back.
back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all that was just the shame in the eyes of your child
Yeah.
was all the motivation I need to say, okay, he's right. I'm not as bad as I think I am, and I just need to get moving.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I finished with an hour to spare ballpark.
So how many people finished that?
I want to say there's usually like 15-ish at that time. I think there's more now. And frankly, the reason I did it then was it was a way to guarantee my
To get
entry.
in.
You know, if you signed up for the Leadman series or the
Yeah.
Lead Challenge, you automatically got entry. And as long as you finished the precursor races, you were in the 100-mile run.
So you have to finish them all.
Correct.
That's what I was gonna ask you next was,
I
okay,
think that's what I n
maybe, who
yeah,
knows? But
I
I was gonna
think that's
say,
what it is.
if you sign up for it, is it like, you keep going if you make it, or you're out if you don't? I don't know.
I don't know myself. I kind of interpreted it that you're out if you don't,
Oh, wow.
because it is a serious challenge, but maybe
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that because I mean, you pay more obviously to run them all,
So
but
for
it's a commitment. I mean,
yeah.
you're going out to Colorado,
Yeah,
like
forget about the marathon and the 50, but I know it's the week before is the 100 bike,
right,
and then the next day after the 100 bike is the 10K,
right,
and then the next week is the 100-mile run.
right, right, right.
Walk me through that week, because that just means, like, you must have gone out earlier. I don't
Right.
know though, and then
No, I
stayed,
went
right?
out I was like a like 12-day stay.
Okay.
And yeah, after the bike, normally you get out there that week and I do some hiking, I do, I try, I always try, your point, like the Mount Sherman. I try to get up at least 3 or 4 times in the first 3 or 4 days I'm out there to kind of kick the acclimation process off. So I'll drive up to Loveland Pass and
Mm,
hike up from there, or I'm staying at Copper Mountain. There's some, Colorado trails across the street, and there's some nice, so I try to acclimate. But after that bike ride, it was pretty much I just laid around.
yeah.
I did nothing. I worked very hard at doing nothing.
What is that course like?
It's mostly gravel roads. They've got a little bit of single track. They have more riders than runners in the bike than the
Oh, okay.
run. And so they really can't do a lot of single track because, if you think Turquoise Lake is
Backed
like
up.
a samba dance that takes forever, on the bike you got to have the ability to pass. The terrifying thing about the bike ride is really you're going up Columbine Mountain, and it's basically a Jeep road. And on the Jeep trail to the right, you got the people going up at 4 miles per hour.
And then,
And then on the way down, you got the pro riders coming at you at
ooh,
45 miles an hour. And, and there's a few points there's, I'm trying to think, St. Kevin's is the first climb. And I walked my bike.
mm,
There's so many people that, trying to keep your balance at 2 miles per hour. So, you walk certain parts of it, but it's way less technical mountain
okay.
biking than it is just altitude and you gotta go.
So there's obviously there's cutoffs too?
Correct,
And what's
correct.
the total time? So it's a
I think
100-mile
you have
bike,
12 hours.
12,
Yeah, and I finished like in 11:10 or something like that.
because you're not trying to kill yourself, because you gotta run a
Well,
East the next
well, the other
weekend.
problem is unless you've done a qualifying bike race, you're in like corral 12 of
Oh, they have to
13.
stage it?
So
Okay,
you're starting at the very back.
okay.
And then I think, your time starts when you go over the mat, but you still have 1,400 bike riders or something like that in front of you. I don't know what the number is, but it's a lot.
And you were used to the triathlon,
Right.
so the bike wasn't anything kinda new-ish, but
Yeah.
kinda bike was a new
Yeah,
thing, right?
mountain biking was
Mountain
new.
bike,
I had
yeah.
never been on a mountain bike race ever. So that part was new. And I mean, my biggest fears were like derailing. Am I going to have a flat tire? And thank God I had no derailments, no flat tires. My Santa Cruz held up beautifully, and just and it's like it's like the race. You just bite off a little section at a time, and before you know it, you're riding across the red carpet.
But there's probably, like, when we were there in 16, we went in way early, so we were there for that bike finish,
Right.
and we were in that little coffee shop, something on the hill, what is it called?
Golden Barrel.
No, it's like the
I
city
don't.
on the hill, some coffee
Yeah.
shop,
Yeah.
and there was a kid came in, and he had DNF'd because his bike broke.
Right.
So, you got in the run, you've got your body to worry about,
Right.
and your fueling and everything. Now you got the bike to worry about too.
Right.
So anything
Right.
can go wrong on that. You get flat tire, what do you do?
Right. Oh, or wipe out. I
Or
mean,
wipe out yeah.
yeah, I mean, obviously you can fall running, but I had one moment coming down Columbine Hill where, I'm on about a 14-foot gravel, and some lady starts shifting over and she keeps pushing me over and over to where I'm like a foot from a drop off in Evergreens. And
Yeah,
I had to put my shoulder against her and said, "Hey, take the road. You've got the road,"
yeah.
and my handlebars
Oh,
shimmy.
yeah, yeah,
And I have this image that I'm going to go down at like 27, 28 miles per hour. And I'm quite sure I gave a good Boston swearing
yes.
at
Well,
her.
you have to from what it
You
sounds like.
have to, but it
Yeah,
was like, lady, what the F are you doing here? You're
right,
gonna kill me.
right.
Terrifying.
It's amazing, and so you get a special at the end of that one, so you finish you can only get your buckle for the 100 mile. You get what are the awards
You get a square buckle for the 100-mile
for
bike ride. You get medals for the 50 and the marathon, and then you get a pickaxe
yeah,
that says, mine says Leadman on it, which is really kind of cool, you
yeah,
know?
it is cool. And John Byrne just did that one,
Correct. Right.
was it 2 years ago?
I think a couple 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We were worried about him on the bike because I think he was training on a bike that when I heard he had no suspension on it, I thought that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. I had dual suspension, and
Yeah,
I'd kick him going downhill. I'd kick him in. It was made nice, cushy ride.
yeah. So you get you do that. That's 2017,
Right.
and now your next goal is to do the 10 Leadvilles. Is that
Right.
your next goal, or what? Tell me what is your
You know,
next next?
that's really it. I'd like to do some other ones. I did Loud Thunder, I
Yep.
saw Kurt out there. God, he was running so yeah, I
Yeah,
love
he's crazy
he's kind
shape.
I love seeing because he's kinda doing what I did where he's getting into his late 40s and he's
Hmm.
getting faster.
Yeah, it's
And,
insane.
it's insane to see because
Hmm.
he ran like a low 9:10 or something like that. I
Hmm.
ran like a 12:20 something. Um,
But you were having fun.
as if I ran I got my younger brother
Yeah,
he's well, you say younger, he's 58, but
yeah,
I kinda got him into this craze 5 years ago, and he's going out to do the Silver Rush for his 3rd time at Leadville, and so he and I were running, and, he's become a good runner. He doesn't run quite as fast as I do, but I said that day, I'm like, "I'm gonna hang with my
yeah.
bro
Why not?
and finish the race together and cross the line with him," and I it was wonderful.
Yeah. No, it was cool. That's a. I mean,
But to get back to it, yeah,
yeah,
my goal is that 1,000-mile buckle right now. I kind of set that as a goal even before I went back in 22, and like I said, the problem was I really couldn't get in. I tried to get in through the traditional route,
yeah,
like 18, 19, 20, then, 20 turned into 21 with COVID, and so then it was like, "All right, if I'm gonna do this before I'm in a wheelchair,
yeah.
I need to do the charitable foundation route," and so I've done 22, 23, and, 22, 23, 24. This will be 25, and then hopefully next year, God willing that I finish this year, I go back out. And I understand you have automatic entry for your 10th.
Oh, really?
You still pay, but I've been
So you're
told
on 9, you get 10 automatic.
right.
Oh,
Now
wow.
I will still
I didn't know
I'll
that.
still go the foundation route because you do get to know these people,
Yeah,
and you wanna support them.
yeah. So maybe we should talk, or you could talk about the statistics on Leadville, because then I want to ask you, like, how many are people are Leadmen, if you have a guess, and then
Yeah.
how many have the 10,000, the 1,000, the 10 times?
Yeah, I don't know, on the 1,000. It can't be I don't think it can be
A
more than
handful of people.
40 or 30 or less
Yeah,
probably.
which is crazy.
I mean, the race is just over 40 years old, and, like last year, Yunko, one of my friend's coaches got her 1,000-mile, and I think she might have been the only one
Wow.
in the race this year, but there's usually only, like, 2 or 3 that are going for it. So, I mean, that'd be like 25, 30 a decade. So, I don't it can't be more than 50 people.
That's
It's a
unbelievable.
pretty small it's a
Yeah.
small group, yeah. And
Holy
that's one
crap.
of the reasons why, I'm like, "Okay,
I
new goal.
wanted it.
I want it.
Yeah.
I want this. I
Yeah.
want this."
What was I asking you? I was asking you that, and then what was um,
Oh, like the
how many?
failure
Yeah,
rates.
yes, the race. Just quickly, because I don't think, I mean, unless you are in this world, nobody really knows what it takes. Number one, but also what the course, how difficult it is. The statistics are 50%.
Yeah, I think, historically, it's 50%. It may be just under
Yeah,
50%.
'cause some years it's
Some
yeah,
years more, some years less. And, part of that's a little deceiving in that I give great credit to the race that you don't have to have run a prior
hmm,
ultra or a prior 100 to sign up. So I do think you get a lot of people at Life Fitness on the treadmill like, "Hey, that looks cool. I'll go do this." And they're like me in 2009. They don't have a clue what they're getting into. They think it's a walk in the park and it's really like a run through fire or something,
yeah,
It's like they just don't know. But it's a terribly difficult course. I mean, Leadville, 10,200, the highest, municipality in the United States. that's the start. You're going up at points, Sugarloaf over 11,000. You're going back down to 9,200 at Twin Lakes, then back up to 12,600 over Hope Pass, and back down to 10,000 at Winfield, and then you get to turn around and do it all over again. And the parts on the Colorado Trail are rocket and rugged,
Oh,
rocky and rugged.
oh,
You do get a little bit of street and trail, and then the field you talked about before,
oh yeah.
outward bound. At least they did
Stepping in the
they they
gopher
did
hole.
they did fill in the gopher holes, or
Yeah,
what do you shoot at? Those things you shoot at on the
yeah.
prairie?
Gophers,
Yeah,
prairie
or
dogs.
prairie dogs. Yeah, they filled in the prairie dog holes at least the last couple of years. But the first year you ran across that field, it was a minefield. All of a sudden your foot goes down a foot. So yeah, it's there's nothing really easy about it.
But going back to the 50%, you mentioned the people that are just dumb enough to sign up and say I can go do it. But you also have the people that are there that are pro, or
Right.
that this is their one thing they're focused on, and they train for a year or two and they still don't make
Well,
it
and and
sometimes.
and and like I said, that's why I get frightened in the 60-year-old division, because the people in their 60s aren't doing this on a whim. At least I don't think they are.
No.
I think most of these people have been longtime runners,
Hmm.
longtime ultra runners. They know what they're getting into. They're going to have maturity and a mental toughness that a 20-year-old may not have. And so when you've got a 23.3% finish rate
Yeah.
in a group of people that take it as seriously as I do,
Mhm.
that tells you it's real,
Yeah.
and that as you get older, it gets tougher. Now, Western States this year I think has 6 70-year-olds,
Wow.
but the finishing rate for 60-year-olds at Western States is like 50%. It is a much easier race. You don't have the altitude, and Western States, when you get to 60 miles, it's pretty much all downhill
Downhill.
from there.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, so I
It's
mean,
still 100 miles. It's still hard. You still got
it
to do it.
it's oh, there's nothing easy about it, but relatively speaking, I think Leadville's that 9 of 10, Western States is like that 6 or 7 of 10 on the John difficulty
Yeah.
score.
But let's not skip over the fact that going into it, you either have a 50 or a 25% chance of finishing, and you still go and
Right,
do it.
right. Well, that's why you go.
Right. But that's just,
That's why I go.
yeah.
I mean, if it were easy and I knew I was gonna finish, it's like, what's the point?
No, I know you're not. I don't think you, I mean, I think Kurt mentioned it last time. In 16, if he didn't get hurt, he probably would have finished. But
And
he went,
I wanna see Kurt go back and
yeah.
join me in the big
Oh
buckle
yeah, I
group,
think
because
it's
I
that's
know I
his that's his
I
goal.
know I know absolutely he can. In fact, I'd love to. I would tell you right now, Kurt, if you're one of the listeners, I will help you in any way I can to get over that, because I know after the 16 he was pretty devastated,
Yeah.
and I think I was probably one of the few that I wasn't congratulating him on a great 60 miles. I was
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, I know that you're pissed
You've
off and this
been
sucks, and
through it.
you
Yeah.
didn't sign up for 60, you signed up for 100." And I'm like, "Hey, but you've got the ability to do it,
Yeah.
and don't let it define you." And by God, he went back and got it, and he's going to have the big buckle before long.
I think he will, but I think what I was going to say about him, when he said that going in 16 he had nothing but "I'm finishing" in his head,
Right,
but when
right,
he went back in 18 he was way more respected the race, knew that there was 50% chance he might not do it, but he prepared himself
right,
for that. And that's
right,
what I think the point I'm trying to make is that you're preparing yourself now, and you have been for the past 10, 15, 20 years, whatever you're
right,
running, to be able to get to that point where you can peak at the right time.
right,
And the 50% thing also means you don't fall, you don't twist your ankle,
right.
you could there's a million things that could go wrong in that race. And weather, all
Whether
kinds of stuff could come up. It's amazing. I can't believe, like, I've been toying with doing it again. And if he does go back, it would be cool to get a bunch of people to go
what
and do it again.
I think your podcast is like, what do you have to lose, John? Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh yeah,
taking
take a
taking
chance.
chances, and
Absolutely. So let's shift to, I mentioned it, where, I think I've leveraged my ability to train and set goals, because, Leadville wasn't the only race I've ever done. I've done other
right,
50s
sure,
and whatever, right? And then this backyard, which was just now, that's got me and it's got my attention. I signed up for another one.
all
I've
right,
actually signed up for two because I was so pissed when I left there. And I don't know if you heard, but when Mark was saying, and I just got this text from Chris Brooks, he goes, "You're not going to remember the lap you didn't I mean, you're not gonna like it's something to do with you're not gonna remember the lap you didn't, or you'll remember the lap you didn't finish, but you'll definitely remember the lap you didn't start.
Right,
And I
right.
was like, that was me this year, and it was hot. I'm like, we're with our friends. It was the first time. I'm like 7 hours. I'm like, it's getting harder.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a crazy concept, and it's one now that I think I'd rather try to do something with that than go run another 100 miler. But I would do Leadville again if everybody does it.
right. Well, and to your point, I think the training for the backyard, you almost have to go out and run 10 miles and then come home, sit around for 2 hours, and then say, I'm going to go run 10 miles again,
Yeah.
and then do it 2 hours later because that cumulative fatigue, yeah, and honestly, that's the thing with, with Leadville. I sit down one time at Leadville,
Wow.
and that's at Twin Lakes on the way
On the
back
way back.
to change my shoes and socks. And other than that, like I'm big into beware of the chair and
Yeah.
get in and out of the aid stations. I think so many people spend way too much time in
You
those
can
aid
for sure.
stations. And so you're always moving. To your point, you're not like, okay, I got 15 minutes to hang around and then you're going again. I know when I finish Leadville and sit down, it takes everything in my
Oh
power
yeah.
just to get back up and get to the car. And so to think about hour 20 in a backyard where you've just finished that lap and you got 10 minutes of downtime to then get the mental psych to get over the lactic acid breakdown, the pain, the muscle fatigue to get going again. It is kind of a completely different animal.
Oh yeah. It is. And you have to train that way. That's the thing I was training when I was talking with Mark about it. I was saying how our training is just, all right, we're going to do 20 miles today.
Right.
And you go run 20
Right.
miles. It's
Right.
not, let's stop every 4 and wait 10 minutes,
Right.
eat something, and then go again.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
that's what I'm trying to incorporate now. But I wanted to talk about, I know we got sidetracked a little bit and I probably got that quote wrong, but when I was saying about you can achieve other things when you do this hard
Right.
stuff, you're like, this is, everything else is easy. I remember going back to work after 2016, and it was like the first day of school for the kids, and it was like right back at it. And you're like,
Right.
go to work. You're like,
Right.
you thought this your life was going to change
Right.
like that. But I felt like after that, almost anything was possible.
Right.
So how do you? Like, I'm assuming the same for you, but from doing hard stuff and running, did it translate into your career? I know you mentioned early on about your career, being a lawyer, then you went into banking. So
Right.
maybe walk through some of the stuff that it either helped you with business or any way somehow
No,
translated.
in fact, we used to do bank newsletters, and I was the CEO of the bank for years, and I even in one of the newsletters said, the analogies between ultra distance running and just getting your job done and doing what we need to do, and whether it's success in business or success running, these things don't just happen.
Hmm.
You've got to have a focus that you want it to happen. You've got to set out a roadmap on how you are going to get there. Need to ask yourself, what am I good at? What am I bad at? On these bad things that keep you from doing your job effectively, how can you get better at them? What is it going to take to get better at them? Time, commitment, dedication, all these things are parallels between business and running. And to your point, yeah, when you know that you can plan and succeed in the ultra world, you really can go to your desk when you come back and say, you know what, if I put that same effort and motivation and planning and then doing, you can have the same success with it. And
Yeah.
at the same time, it's not always perfect. And
Yeah.
in business, 2009 is a year I would never want to repeat in the banking world, but like that 2009 Leadville DNF, I probably learned more about myself
Mhm.
and what I needed to do both in banking and in the ultra world by having adversity,
Yeah.
hit me in the face. And you really do learn more sometimes from the failures
Yeah.
than you do definitely from the easy wins.
Yeah.
An easy win, if I go out and run a 5K and do it in a 10-minute per mile pace, I'm just out there spending time. I'm not learning, but the adversity, and the accomplishment, they go hand in hand. And yeah, I think there's a reason why you see a lot of business people and successful people in the ultra world, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I also think it's pretty cool you see all types of people. I'm a 61-year-old, conservative banker, And I have no problem cracking a brew and hanging with,
Yeah.
the tattoo covered 23-year-old, dude who's like, yeah, man, let's
Yeah.
go out and run the trail. Yeah, hey, we have a shared love that brings us all together. It's great.
Yeah. I think there is definitely something about the group running in this ultra community.
Without a
It's
question.
it's like I feel like it's so supportive of each other.
Right.
I don't think it's the same in marathon. Maybe it is, but
I'll tell you right now, in the Ironman world, I have the I'll give you two examples here. Dylan Bowman, who's got his podcast, big podcast, Trail Society, and he does the play-by-play for Western States. Um, his uncle's a friend of mine from Davenport Country Club, and I went up at Leadville the one year and Western States again. And I'm like, hey, I know your Uncle Jerry. Could not have been a more warm,
it is cool.
embracing, welcome, what can I do?
Yeah.
Super cool. When I ran Western States at the 90-mile aid station, Hal Corner, who won the race a few years before, and he's one of the four in the movie Unbreakable,
Oh,
Western
okay.
States. I mean, Hal's the one asking me, do you want bacon on
Oh,
your
wow.
quesadilla? And literally my pacer at the time, John Appert's like, dude, the bromance has to end. You
Yeah.
better run. But I'm like, hey, these pros are here and they're encouraging and they're giving back and they're doing all the things you'd want a person to do. And then you go to the triathlon world, and it's like, hey, get the heck out of my
Yeah,
pro
that's
space. What are you
yeah.
doing? What are you doing looking
Yeah.
at my bike? I mean, completely. And obviously, those are extreme examples, but I never felt that sense of
Me.
community, shared encouragement. At the ultra, you all start together. If
Yeah.
I went out, to a race, Courtney DeWalters, and if I wanted
Yeah.
to stand next to Courtney at the beginning of
Yeah.
the race, I could stand next to her and say, "Hey, Courtney, have a great day." And I think she'd be like, "You too, buddy."
Yeah.
Whereas, at an Ironman, they're starting 15 minutes before me, and they don't want to ever see me.
Yeah.
You know,
I know.
so the ultra
That
community
is,
is
yeah,
super,
it is cool that you are on the same course at the same time
right?
with the elites of the world, right?
And the nice thing about the out and back, while you do have to say
Seeing
excuse,
some,
you do have to say
hmm,
excuse me 400 times. You also get to see them again, and
yeah,
I remember Scott Urich. I was just coming over the top of Hope Pass. He was coming back up, and I had just read his book. I'm like, dude, Scott
yeah,
Urich. I'm like,
right,
I just read your book, man. I
right,
love it. He's like, yeah, right on. Have a
yeah.
good
I
race.
had a moment like that with Tim Olson,
Oh yeah,
and I was going, went over Hope, and we're coming down. It must have been pretty hot because those guys were booking it, right?
yeah, right, right.
And I think, and I could get this wrong, but I felt like the rules of downhill, or when you're on a mountain, the person going down has right away.
Should be,
Should be, right?
should be.
And he was coming up, and I didn't know. I was just an idiot, whatever. And I kind of like stepped aside. He's like, "No, man, go," and he let me go
All right.
because I was like, "Okay, so
Oh, that's
that's kind of
cool.
cool."
Very cool.
Yeah, I think what I was getting at though is that the community of ultra runners, when you mentioned, you could be hanging out with like the 23-year-old kid and all that kind of stuff. I also think it breaks down boundaries
Right.
between
Everybody.
everything.
Right.
You're out there because they know
Right.
what you're doing is the same thing they're doing.
Right.
It's this commonality of that community that's really cool about it.
And in most races, people they're not there to beat you. They're there to have shared success.
Right.
And I have to say, like, I remember, I think the first contact I had with you was, I think Tom Waterman or someone gave you my name, and I think you sent an email to me and
Yeah.
said, "Hey, like, hey, I'm in the ultra world," and I think I'm like, "Hey, I sent you a bunch of information back and got to know you, preliminarily through that." And it's like, hey, if I can help somebody become a better
Yeah.
runner or share wisdom, it's like I want to see. Now, I don't want to see it so commercialized that I can't get into races, but I'm always, when I see someone has the same passion, if I can help them, it's like it just makes you feel great to see people succeed.
Yeah. I talked a little bit about
Again,
that.
again, like business, you want to make the
Yeah.
analogy with business.
Absolutely.
You got team members and you want to see them do well, and what tools do you need to give them?
But in sometimes in business, managers want to see their employees fail
Well, that's true. That's true.
because
Yeah.
they want to take all the credit.
Well,
And that's
I'm not in banking anymore. That's all I'll say.
Mike. When I was talking to Michael Wardian last week about the commercialization, I'll call it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it seems like it's a kind of double-edged sword type deal, right? I don't remember, I didn't talk about this with him, but I'll bring it up. I remember it was it was stupid that I fell for it, but with what's the stupid race in Virginia, West Virginia? What's the one? The Barclays.
Mark, yeah.
Do you remember one year? It
Is it
was
Tennessee or West Virginia?
I can't remember
I
if
think
it's
it's
West
Tennessee.
Virginia or
Yeah, yeah.
Tennessee, but anyway, that was like the most underground
Right, right.
race ever, right?
Yeah.
And
Like,
now everybody kind
where
of
where do you even send your application?
yes,
Yeah,
exactly, all that, right? But now it's like people know more about
yeah.
it,
Flannel shirts, socks, and a license
all
plate.
kinds of crazy stuff. And I remember one year, and it was stupid that I fell for it, but it was obviously April 1st. But
Right, right.
that week leading up to April 1st, two guys, it was like that guy Gary Robbins and
Yep.
somebody else said they they like somebody bought the race. Do you
The
remember that? You know
yeah,
what I'm talking
you
about?
know exactly. The race in Canada, and I think it might be at Banff. It was a 100-mile Canadian race with Gary Robbins, and basically through the Val Corporation, they basically sold it to Ironman, which was also Ironman is now I think bought by UTMB, or
Oh,
there's some
okay.
ownership between the UTMB and Ironman people, and that was kind of the first big race. Ironman said, well, we're going to buy it, and screw the local fat ass people who run these things, and we're going to take it over. And I read everything on the sport. I listen to everything
Hmm.
on the sport. And to me, there's right ways and wrong ways to do it. And, you take Leadville, I think Lifetime learned in 2013 that we can't have 950 people start this race. We can't impose our corporate will. It can't be about Lifetime. It's got to be about the runner first, the community. And then if because Lifetime is providing these amenities, people want to support lifestyle, they get it through the goodwill. I think when Ironman just goes out and says, okay, you've been running this race for a long time, but we have connections with the Vail people, so you don't get your course anymore. That's when
Hmm.
I think when people like myself and the trail community say, wait a minute, that's BS. Gary Robbins and his people worked a long time to create a great race, and you're basically trying to cannibalize it, and that's wrong. And that's the risk. Now, having said that, when I started this in 2009, there weren't that many 100-mile races you could find.
Yeah. Now
And
there's
and the
hundreds of them.
and so I think right now you're finding there can be everything. There can be the corporate race, and you can still, I run Josh Sun's race.
Hmm.
Mine I haven't run Mines of Spain. I was going to run it, but I was scheduled for my neck fusion the
Uh,
next day, and I thought, it's probably not good to go to a neck fusion the day after a 100-mile run, so I deferred that year. But you got like guys like Josh who put on great
yeah,
races,
he
great
does.
races.
Yeah.
You've got I'm trying to think the lady that runs Hennepin,
Michelle.
Michelle Hartwig.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's taken over Kettle Moraine, which I've run the 100-mile there twice. I've run the 100K there twice. These people love the sport, and
Hmm.
as long as we have people like that are willing to invest the time and effort to put on these great races, then if the corporate people want to take over Western states, well, maybe I won't be able to get in, and maybe I just won't run it again.
Yeah.
But I got great satisfaction finishing Kettle Moraine twice. I got great satisfaction finishing Hennepin once. So 100 miles is 100 miles. It doesn't need to be corporate 100.
Yeah.
I think we'll find there's space for everybody. But what Ironman and UTMB did with that situation in Canada was really below the belt.
Yeah. Yeah. Why we were talking about it was because it's almost like the whole situation with the WNBA and the WNBA women
Right,
players saying we want more money, but
right,
there's not any more money there, right? If you're not generating the
right,
commercial revenue, so that's the double-edged sword of these races now, where if you want to become like that guy, Mark Dowdle, he wants to be a professional runner,
right,
and it's just like there's not a lot of money out there, right? Like, I mean, Hoka is not going to just call you and say, we're going to give
right,
you 150 grand a year to wear our shoes.
right.
But now prize money, like, I mean, there's no prize money,
In
right?
Leadville,
In
there's zero.
Leadville?
Leadville
Yeah,
zero.
zero prize money.
In fact, the pros pay their entry fee.
Right. So I think that's the cool part about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
cool
yeah.
things like that, and I hope it stays that way. It's kind of disappointing that it's a lottery now, and you can't just get in and all that. Which I guess you have to minimize the
Right,
amount of they've changed all kinds of stuff, and that's the other thing about what you're going through is you've gone through iterations of you can't go to Winfield now.
right.
You can't get a pacer at Winfield now.
Which is
You can't
disheartening.
even now. I heard last year
Well, you
you
got a
can't
lottery to get a spot at Twin Lakes now.
just to get a place
To get a spot for
for the
your
crew.
crew is a lottery.
Wow.
I lost the first drawing. They're having a second drawing. Now, if they don't get a designated spot, apparently they can still set up along the path or the road somewhere, but they can't be in that area between the fire station and when you exit the
Yeah.
road where,
Wow.
they would set up their
So
own.
they want to make it harder.
They're just trying to limit the number of people.
And I don't know. We don't have to dig into that.
Yeah,
But what I heard is that you can't be at the first aid station.
correct. May Queen is no longer a crude aid station on the way out. Yeah.
Why? I don't. We don't have to
I
answer
I
that.
think
I just think that's
yeah,
kind of
and
crazy. Like now,
I think that has more to do with the Twin Lakes people don't want the town completely taken over. I think that's
that's
Twin
I
Lakes.
get it because it's a
And I
disaster.
think May Queen is just congestion with the traffic. It's not made to, and the
Hmm.
problem is you have all 800 runners
They're
arriving
still in
with,
the race.
and they're in the race and they're
Yeah.
arriving within an hour of each other.
So
It,
yeah.
it makes for really awful traffic there. The one that, to your point that bothers me is, I think more people need to lobby Congress on Forest Service and things like that. Because, Western States is a point to point
Mhm.
race. There's no reason 2,000 people can't run Western States. They could literally corral based on your qualifying
Mhm.
time, and you're never going to trip over anybody or have to pass them one way or the other. What limits Western States is there were 400 or less runners when it started, and the Forest Service has said, well, that's all you're
That's what
going
you're
to
gonna get.
have.
Yeah.
And that'd be a great one. I'd love to see him have 1,000 runners, and that's a race that absolutely could accommodate 1,000 plus runners.
The thing about training now for 2025 Leadville is now you're almost self-supported the whole time. I mean, a lot of the time. Not
Yeah.
self-supported in terms of you can't
No, you don't see your
you
crew. You
get
don't.
aid stations
Yeah,
that are theirs,
you
but
don't you don't see your crew until outward bound. So, either
it's
you have
29, 20,
25 miles.
25 miles
So
in.
ballpark. So you either have
Yeah.
to, yeah, you either have to drop bag or rely on the aid station at May Queen, and then you don't see till outward bound. And then it's kind of funny because you have outward bound, and then you see him again like in 4 miles at
Yeah, that one.
Pipeline,
Yeah.
or yeah, Pipeline,
Yeah, pipeline, yep.
and then you have another aid station half pipe right after that, and then ideally you see him at Twin
Twin
Lakes.
Lakes. And now
Um,
they're making that harder.
yeah, but in the old days, man, it was great seeing him at Winfield and picking up the pacer at
Yes.
Winfield.
Yeah. So now
And by the way, if they're not going to allow anyone at Winfield but the runners, I'd love it if they let us go back to the road and
yeah.
skip the Colorado Trail extension because it added like a half mile to a mile to the race, and it really is a tough section of
Yeah.
the. I think that's one reason it's a lot harder to get that big buckle when they went from running on the road to Winfield to running on the Colorado extension because it added about a mile, and it's not an easy mile. It's not easy.
See, that's you knowing the course so well. I don't even remember it. I just remember getting there. I
Yeah.
remember getting there and being like, "This is really hard."
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Now I gotta go climb that
Well, I
again.
remember you passing me on the boulevard on the way back,
Do you
thinking,
remember?
that son of a bitch. What do you know? Go, man, go. Like
Do
you
you
got it.
remember my buddy Jimmy Olson? He was pacing me at that
Right,
time,
right,
and it
right,
was like we were in that whole, it's like that roly poly hills there,
right, right,
and I
right.
just remember him. Every time we pass somebody, he would just scream and yell. And then at the end, he's like, "You passed the donker." And I was
No,
like,
he did.
and he started sprinting ahead of me,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
"Jim, take it easy. We still got to run another 10 more miles."
Which, by the way, that 2016 is also the when you try to run for time at Leadville, you do increase your probability that you may not
That you,
finish the
yeah,
race at all.
yeah.
Because that was
I
one where I was plainly going after a big buckle, and I was flying through the first half of the race, and boy, by the end of the race, I was happy to walk in, and I was happy to have John O'Brien run by me with a hoot.
That was once in a lifetime.
Yeah, it was
That's
very
why
cool.
I don't know. I mean, I admire the fact that you've done it multiple times, and you're gonna go for this big buckle, and I hope you get it. And like I told you, if you needed any support or a crew
Yeah.
or a pacer, I know you got it dialed in, but
I
I'm
mainly
off.
paid. I've got my as long my son's married now, so his life's a little more complicated. Having my son Walter as my head crew has been
Oh yeah,
enormous. He knows me. He knows the race as well as I do.
yeah,
But I may very well take you guys up on the other part because pacers. I've got one pacer for sure, but it's tough to ask a pacer to run 40 miles with you. It's kind
yeah.
of nice to break that up.
Speaking of that, I think I talked a little bit about it with Michael Wardian that um, Killian Jornet
It's either Jornet
Jornet.
Jornet.
Did you see what he did on social media?
No.
So for I think it's Western States.
He's one, yeah.
He wants a pacer. Did you see this? So he
No.
put it out there and he was like, "Hey, I'm looking for applications to be a pacer for me, but here are the qualifications." And you're like,
Right.
"This, I mean, there's
Yeah, right.
nobody.
Yeah. Yeah,
If
you
you're,
can run a 420 mile.
yeah, if you're running, 6
Yeah.
minute miles up the mountain,
Right,
that's who
right.
he
Well, he's
needs."
the favorite now because I think Walmsley
Yeah, I saw that
dropped out
yesterday.
with an injury, and then one of the other top guys didn't know if he could go and dropped out as well. So
Hmm.
they were talking about doing Unbreakable 2
Oh,
if it had been Walmsley and Journay and the other. But yeah, I will not be pacing Killian Journay
so
ever.
one last topic. It's a local race. It's the Bix. It's coming up, and I don't know
Right.
if you've got that on your calendar or how many times you've run it, but
I it's one of these. They always ask how many times I've run it, and
yeah,
I know I've
you
run
got
it like over 20.
yeah.
I'll be frank, the last few years I have skipped Bix. I had a few years where a family vacation would get in the way, going up to Minnesota to fish with the in-laws. But then even when I've been available, um, I've been opting to go out and do like a long trail run instead.
Mhm.
You know, people are like, "Oh, it's so hard to run these ultras and that," but it's really hard to try to run like a 7:30 pace for 7 miles on pavement and
Yeah,
not feel like shit
yeah.
like for the next 4 days. I usually feel a hell of a lot worse after the Quad City Marathon than I do after like the Loud Thunder 50 because, I think I ran like 3:44 the last 3 years. Within 20 seconds, 3:44.
Wow.
And running 3:44 on pavement, I hurt so much more for the next
Oh, yeah.
week than running on trails. And so I love Bix. I love everything about it. I sent Kurt a little deal. I had a 46:30
Uh-oh.
when I was 49 years old, maybe 50. That
So
was my
he's
and he needs 10 seconds below that. He's going to get it. I know he's going to get it. But, I just I stopped playing basketball because I don't want to get hurt for running. I'm not doing much bike riding because I don't want to get hurt for
yeah,
running. And running a really fast Bix and then consuming 14 beers
yeah.
afterwards is probably not in my best long-term training. So it's a wonderful race. I mean, it's the classic Quad City race, but I have to decide if I'll run it. And here's my problem. I mean, I've got the personality that I can't just sign up for a race and
You could
just
do it.
if
If you
I'm
get
gonna
in,
go
it's a
if I
race,
wanna
it's a
do it,
race.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I
absolutely.
can say, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna do it in an hour and 20 minutes and have some fun and drink on the way and have a beer, but once I get in, it's like, "Oh,
Yeah, it
there's
does
the
I
hill."
think timing wise for Leadville, it's probably in a bad spot.
Right.
Yeah,
We're talking 4 weeks,
a
5 weeks,
month in.
4 weeks before,
Yeah.
and so I'm trying now to actually do I've always been one to do the taper, but, I want that last 50-mile run to be, probably mid-July, and then after that, just kinda taper.
Are
I'll
you gonna are you just do a 50 mile?
I really wanted to do the Silver Rush, but,
Oh.
it's the same. They last year, they had the marathon one weekend and the 50-mile run the next weekend, and I did both.
Oh, wow.
So and the Leadville Marathon's over 13,000. It's actually the
Yeah.
hardest course mile for mile
Yeah.
of all of them.
I've heard that.
But this year I won't be able to do it. So I'm pretty much gonna have to like do your Long Grove special,
Yeah.
get your directions to Long Grove or wherever it was that you ran and West Durant or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try to create my own 50 miler probably in July. My birthday's on the 14th of July. Maybe I'll do like 61 for 61 or
That's funny
something.
you say that because I just
Yeah,
let it I said, you know what I'm gonna do? I wanna do 57 on my birth
57.
50. Am I 57? Yeah. Holy crap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I don't know if I'm gonna do it or not. I thought about it. I remember Dave McGilvery. He used to do his
Right.
age every year for a while
Yeah.
there, and I think he stopped at like 50 something
Yeah,
now. Stopped
I would
running.
have loved to have run Kettle Moraine, but I'm still a market ambassador for the bank for
Right,
TBK,
yeah.
and we sponsor Lobster Fest, which is this Friday. Kettle Moraine is Saturday,
Oh yeah, you can't do
and
that.
I can't consume
Yeah.
copious amounts of
Yeah.
crustacean and then run the next morning.
Yeah. All right, last question. We know what's next. So it's June. You got July, August
Right, we're 9 weeks
coming
away.
down.
9 weeks
That's
away. Yeah,
wow. And I saw you've been running Sunderbrook. So
yeah.
if you once you get the 10, what do you think you're gonna do?
You know, they give you a fantastic jacket if you come back for the 11th.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ken Clover has some word for it. I can't remember what they call it, but they really do try to create like a, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Will you keep running though? I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
my wife wants to hear that I'm gonna not continue running
Yeah.
100-mile runs. But I will either go back to Leadville again. I have been getting in the Western States lottery for the last 3 years. So, I'll be up to like 8 tickets this year, and after next year I'll be up to 16. Maybe I get into that again. I'd love to go back and do that. If I got into that, I'd probably try to do the Grand Slam and do that, Wasatch, and then I don't know if it's Old Dominion or there's 2 on the East
Is it the
Coast.
Hard
No,
Rock?
no, Hard Rock's not in there. It's the 4 like original. So it's Old Dominion or there's another East Coast race.
Is it the Vermont one?
Might be Vermont. Vermont 100. It's either Vermont or Old Dominion, and then it's Wasatch, Western States. And the nice thing, if you get into Western States, all of those races
You
will
get in.
guarantee your entry if you are a Grand Slam. And so it's like a end of June race. I think then it's Vermont or Old Dominion in July, then Leadville, then Wasatch. So that
Wow.
would be on my radar. I've thought about, do I want to try like Tahoe 200,
Mhm.
go out that distance? I think about a backyard, but honestly, I would go at it with the attitude that I want to win it.
Yeah. No, you got to.
Can stubborn old man
I
beat?
think I think you have to
Yeah.
go into it with that. That's
Or
the
or
only
or a
way.
100-mile minimum or something like
Yeah.
that.
Even if you had that 100-mile minimum in your head, depending on the course and when it is and the
Yeah.
weather and all that, I think is still pretty
But but
daunting because it's the format.
yeah, beyond the 1,000, I wanna keep doing this, because, I'm 61, I still hit the golf ball
Hmm.
forever. I can walk around to golf and run 10 miles in the same day. I may need a nap, but,
Yeah.
the health benefits, the mental benefits, it wouldn't take long for me to get really fat, lazy,
Yeah.
depressed
Yeah.
if I quit running. So,
Yeah.
my long-term goal is I would really love to try Leadville at age 70 and be one of the, instead of being one of 50 who's run 1,000, maybe be one of 10 who's done it at age 70
Yeah.
and try to keep pushing that fountain of youth out.
Yeah. I do know because I'm getting there.
Yeah, it doesn't get easier.
No.
And I found aging is not linear. And in the last 2
Mm-mm.
years, I used to run like an 8:30 easy mile. Now, 9:30 is an easy mile for me. So, you do it.
Oh
You
yeah.
you feel it. Suddenly at age 60, it's not quite as easy. But I put on the leg sleeves when I'm done. I use
Hmm.
my massage gun. I do ab workouts 3 4 times a week. I hang upside down, and I do the things I do to keep on going.
Yeah. There's a lot that I think that's what I've learned is the older I've gotten, the more rehab, I'll call it, I have to do. It's the consistency of the
Right.
stretching, the cross training. We didn't even touch on that, but
Right.
the weightlifting, trying to get stronger legs.
Yeah, and I really
Uh,
core is really all. I do that Ab Ripper X program from the
okay.
P90X, and I do that like it's about a 20-minute workout 4 times on my core, and as long as and then I do some work on my glutes and
Hmm.
hamstrings, but I don't really wait. I probably should, but the other issue I have, and I don't want to prolong this, but
No,
I've got an enlarged aorta, which I have checked regularly. I'm at like 4.3 centimeters. So weightlifting is not a good thing for me to do.
gotcha.
You don't want to really strain because it puts stress on your aorta. I'm fine to run. That's one of the other reasons I don't run fast interval stuff anymore. Is I can run forever at 120, 130 beats per minute, but if I get it up into 160, I'm probably not doing
Yeah.
myself favors.
It's funny you say that because I remember you probably don't remember these little conversations that you have I have had, but I remember you talking about heart rate training 10 years ago. I don't even
Right.
remember what year it was, but recently after that backyard, my heart rate got to like 185
Ooh.
because it was, you're hiking, then you're running, and then you're going
Right.
downhill, then you're
Right.
hiking
Right.
again and everything, and it was getting hot and red. I started after that really focusing on not my pace, but my heart rate.
Right.
So,
Right.
this watch tells me
Yeah.
what my heart rate is, and I've been trying to maintain under 145 for
Right.
everything.
Right.
Even my speed work, I want to work up to where I'm not getting above 150 or 155. Like my average will be 138
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
14
Yeah.
miles,
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember you saying that, and that's like they call it what, zone 2 or something
Right.
like
Zone
that
2.
now, zone
Right.
2.
Right.
And like it's so funny because I see all these memes about people are like, "What's zone 2?" Like no one
Right.
even
Right.
knows what
Right.
the hell
Right.
that
Right.
even
Right.
means. But heart rate training makes sense. I have a heart history of heart problems in my family. My like dad heart attack, my grandfather
Right.
heart attack, my older brother heart attack.
Wow.
All have stents. I go to a cardiologist. I do the stress tests,
Yep.
but I probably don't do what they want me to do still. But I keep running, and I think that's your point is
Running
that
solves a lot of ills.
yeah. So I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
Um,
Been fun.
yeah, no, I think you probably don't know, but you are a topic of our long runs a lot because, you're the longevity, you've got that dialed in, the Leadville legend kind of guy, and you're inspiring people, inspired me. So I appreciate you doing this for me. So
You
thank you.
bet. Oh, thank you.